What if the factors that fuel human trafficking aren't just forces out there, but right here, shaping the world we live in every day? Here, we take an unflinching look at how cultural influence, hidden pain, and exploitative systems contribute to the demand for commercial sex. This isn't just another awareness podcast about a social issue. It's about people, the human stories of those harmed, those healing, and those waking up to their role in change. Welcome to the Demand Disruption Podcast.
Welcome to the Demand Disruption Podcast. It is really the fruition of nearly a decade of work.
Yep.
A lot of conversation, a lot of learning. More than that, collaboration. And that's where we want to invite you in. The conversations we're going to have today are really strictly about not just human trafficking and related things, but how that affects all of us. Because it seems like such a rare, extreme thing. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk a little bit about how we started this work.
Yeah.
How we got where we are, because nobody plans this work. You don't write this down as, okay, you know what I'm going to do for a living. And in doing so, really just kind of kick it back and forth on where that's evolved to, so a little bit about our mission and what to expect from our season one and some of the guests and the stuff we're going to be working on. So I'm Joe Madison, Executive Director of Demand Disruption.
And I'm Fong Marquez, Associate Director of Demand Disruption.
Yeah, so just thinking about how we got here, I think we got to go really way back to the beginning. A lot of people used to know us by a different name, Love People Not Pixels. Mm-hmm. And then we became Demand Disruption. And a lot of people don't know that we were founded initially by a former sex buyer, somebody who found that freedom and restoration through doing the hard work. And then he came to a point where he's like, I can't be the only one going through this. Not in this culture. There's no way. And that began having difficult conversations with parts of the community, whether it's businesses, churches, individuals. And that's really kind of the roots of where we started. When did you first hear about Demand Disruption?
Well, I actually wanted to ask you to maybe walk through some of the other names that we had.
You can tell I was avoiding that, huh? All right, so this guy, who we'll give all the credit to of being the founder of
And a great friend still.
But back, he was not a great namer of names. So his first thought was we were going to name this thing. This was before me, so I take no responsibility. He was trying to bring awareness to what pornography does in our world and our culture, and how it becomes this infectious thing in people's lives, and the effect it had on him, but also people that he's met with. And so he thought, we're going to call it porno, but K-N-O-W, because
there's a difference.
You're going to know about it. And if I were there next to him, I would have said, bro, now tell somebody to go look up your website. What would you say? Well, I'd tell them to go look up porno. And I would hope that at that point some realization would. So that name didn't last super long. No.
Thankfully.
No, thankfully. And so from there, it went to Voice for Choice, but that in and of itself has its own baked-in confusion. And the tagline was Love People, Not Pixels.
Yeah.
And my son, Christian Madison, who is a creative design, brilliant person, was actually working with Bo before me. And in doing so, was like, I think that's your name. And people loved it. And it kind of gave a baseline to where our whole thinking was. Let's understand what we're actually doing and how we're doing it and the effect it's having on our community. And so that went for a little while, but then finally we became Demand Disruption in a really cool way, because our defenders, what we call our volunteers, we started seeing them stepping up to do work in ways that were well beyond what the impact of pornography or exploitation was. It was directly related to human trafficking and the demand that fuels that. And so having conversation after conversation, whenever I took over executive director and founded Demand Disruption in 2019, we had a list of about 6 names. And that was one that we put on the list. I think we got an argument of who came up with it, but I'm taking credit for it because I'm the only one here. I'm pretty sure that was one of my names. And we had a few others, and our defenders chose that name. And we were extremely proud. In late January of 2020, to unveil demand disruption. And then the world was extremely annoying to unveil COVID
Yes.
in March of 2020. So not the ticker tape parade with the new name that we were hoping for, but it really did crystallize another part of this work. And that is, how do we get out of physical spaces and get in front of groups? How do we get to where we're going to where they are? And that COVID made that necessary for everybody. And we were one of the first early adopters and did so under our new name. So there.
Yeah, no, because I knew you guys from Love People Not Pixels back in like 2018 or so.
Did you say the name right back then? Because most people get it wrong.
Yeah, Love People Not Pixels.
We've been Love People Not Pickles. And they catch that usually because it's pretty obvious. We've been Love Pixels Not People. And I'm like, that's so not our message.
No.
So
Yeah.
But you had it, huh?
Yeah, because I was working at another anti-trafficking organization that hosted a summit every year. And, like for summits, we're always inviting, a person from each part of the human trafficking, focus continuum of addressing the issue. So you'd have someone from like the DA's office and like someone from HPD and then other anti-trafficking partners that were doing similar things. And I remember like looking on the program and seeing Love People Not Pixels. And I was like, this felt already unique.
Yeah.
To hear Bo speak that year, the founder of Love People Not Pixels, and just hearing how he was talking about the need for talking about a porn prevalent culture, a hypersexualized culture, how it impacted his story and testimony, how he was reaching out to other people like him. Already right there, I was like, man, this is such a cool organization. If I wasn't working here, I totally would want to go work with them.
Man, that's cool. I never heard that version of the story.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And then, kind of during COVID, I was trying to figure out things, what am I doing with my life, as many of us were during COVID. And my friend and I put together this little online bakery just to kind of pass the time because we were in between jobs and I was trying to figure out my life. And both of us had come from that job from the other anti-trafficking organization. And so we were wanting to still contribute back to the cause somehow. And we got invited to a meeting with our friends at the Freedom Church Alliance.
Yeah, I remember that.
And we were kind of networking and just telling people about our cookies and our cakes. And they invited you there to speak. And that was the first time I heard of demand disruption. And I was like, I swear that's Joe Madison from...
That's familiar.
Yeah, I was like, I swear that's Joe Madison from Love People Not Pixels. What's he doing with a new organization? And then come to find out, it was a kind of rebrand of Love People Not Pixels. And I guess I should just go into how I came to work at Demand Disruption.
Yeah, and I remember that day because I was rushing back into town.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
You were late.
I was late, but I did drive 4.5 hours. But I was rushing back into town, and I almost forgot to even acknowledge that transition from Love People Not Pixels to Demand Disruption because it was still pretty new. But not so new that I didn't think people already knew. And it was funny, somebody else that day said, okay, I thought you switched organizations. I was like, no, we really are the same. It just... And one of the coolest ways to make us change our name, we had to catch up to what our volunteers were doing.
Yeah.
We had to honor the work they were doing by reflecting it in our name and title and our tagline, which is Love, Disrupt, Defend, because that's what our volunteers were doing. And I think that's just a really cool way. Not so much vanity of the people who are running the org. It was, look what our people are doing and look what the difference it's making. So yes, I would love to hear your version because I know my version.
Yeah, you had come to the meeting to talk about this new program that you were launching called the Church Body Project, where it was this more focused initiative to reach church communities and being able to come alongside church programs and provide resources and workshops and training materials surrounded on the topic of a hypersexualized culture. And I remember being there that day, listening and being like, this sounds awesome again, Yeah. And I didn't really think anything more of that. But I continued volunteering, doing the bakery, and then volunteering at my church. And my church at the time asked me to lead their anti-trafficking efforts because they knew I had this background. And so we had picked 2 organizations to go to kind of go deeper in our partnership, The Landing and Demand Disruption. And so, we set up a partner meeting where I was representing my church. And we caught up, talked about how we interacted when I was working at the other organization, what we've been up to, all of that. And still in that meeting, I was like, wow, would love to work for this organization.
That's cool.
And then literally I had this moment of I think he's just going to call me and offer me a job. And I was like, because we had met once or twice afterwards just to kind of talk more.
Yeah.
And then you called me 3 weeks later and was like, do you want to come work for us? And I was like, I knew you were going to call me.
You told me that. And when you said that, I thought, I wonder if she really did. And then I realized very soon after, you don't say a lot of things you don't mean, if any. So I was like, no, yeah, that's exactly how that played out. And I mean, poaching from a church, I guess I should feel bad about that, but I don't. I totally stole you right from them. And it was, when I say, where we're coming from and why we're doing what we're doing, so that background, again, it's not a master plan. It's being open to what is possible and how can I contribute to this fight against human trafficking. Right. And that's how I started. It was the same thing. I was in corporate America for 25 years, did strategic sales, capital project management, and just got wrecked finding out about human trafficking through our house church, of all places. We had a couple in there who'd volunteered and done some missionary work, and they mentioned it to us. And I remember them talking and thinking, man, what would it be like to live in a country like that, where trafficking still happens? And so it took me a while to get to that point and say, I can't believe it's still happening in some places. And they're like, what do you mean? I said, because they were in Southeast Asia, and there's quite a bit of prostitution in Southeast Asia and also in other parts of Europe. But he's like, I can take you 20 minutes down the road and I'll show you exactly where it's happening. And I thought it was a bit of an exaggeration, and I realized it was an understatement.
Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't only show me that, but you could show me 3 other iterations of it. And that became our introduction to somebody that's a partner friend org of ours, Elijah Rising. Mm-hmm. And my wife and I volunteered with them for a while. And then as oil and gas downturns happen, I got laid off. And it was just clear, you need to go do this for a while. And I mean, basically I told my wife, let me translate. Honey, I think I'm supposed to do this work. I feel called to do it. Let me translate that to the person who is in the household, who I am the main breadwinner, and she is working sort of part-time as a nurse. Hey, I think you should go back to work, and I won't bring in $1 for probably 14 months, and I will volunteer to try to understand human trafficking while you pay really all of our bills and support us. And so that would have been totally her prerogative to hear it that way. And instead, she said, okay. And she did. And she went back to work. And so that journey really was a beginning of understanding, because that's the difference we talk about, right? Awareness and understanding. Mm-hmm. It kind of brings us to today. This is a different medium for us.
Yeah, for sure.
I love presenting. We got to do it last week with some partners, but we're bound by the slide.
Yeah.
We're bound by the room. We're bound by the time. This is important to bring really the intricacy of what we work with and what we see in the human stories and bring it to a different medium, because the stories are endless. And you do this for nearly 10 years now, as Demand Disruption has, and you've done it for longer, not only with us, but with other orgs. I'm sure you'll talk about that. You see, yes, the hard part, the sad part, the difficult part, but man, you see so much of what humanity is capable of overcoming, enduring, and then leading once you've come through it.
Yeah.
I mean,
the hope too.
Oh yeah.
I think that's something that even to this day, it's difficult to find, but it shows up in the most unexpected places. I just want to walk back and say a shout out to all anti-human trafficking spouses out there.
Yeah.
Incredible, incredible people.
Yeah, they are. They are. Yeah. You can't even put in words what it is to have somebody say, okay, you want to take a bow of poverty and go after this unsolvable problem? I'm with you. Let's do this. That's kind of what it comes down to. So that's a good shout out for sure.
Well, I think, with all this experience that we both have, and also too talking about just the shared humanity of it all and how we, can find hope in the unexpected places. What draws you to our work specifically?
I had a conversation like this a few days ago, so I actually have an answer without stammering. I was reminded of one of the first presentations I ever did, and it was at a church in Katy, and it's called the Waters Church, actually. And I was talking to a men's group, and the room full of people. And it was the first time, I think, so when you're talking about this, you're the least popular guy in the room, especially to a group full of men. Hey, let me talk to you about pornography. Let me talk to you about the 40 negative consequences. Let me talk to you about all of that, right? Here you go. I'm going to draw you a nice shame bath. Just get in. Just sit there for a while. Yeah, we're going to do it for 40 minutes. Is that okay? Like, that going in, and it's hard not to be preoccupied by that and, not say certain things you should say. But I just felt like saying it. And there was a guy, and I saw the switch from him understanding that, I don't feel necessarily right about this, but I don't feel like I'm hurting anybody because she must want to do this. In that 40 minutes, we got to break down the lies that perpetuate commercial sex industry and then spill over into an illicit sex industry, the justification, the consumption, all of it. And I remember talking with him afterwards, and I could see him coming around, and the defensiveness and fear, because that's how it started.
Yeah.
Really started to melt away. And there's a credit to him. It wasn't any magic I said. It's just one of the first time that this man talked to another man about something that was very real and something that the world will not tell you, because the world has something to sell all of us.
Yeah.
And seeing that possibility was something I needed more than he did, maybe, because I needed to know that I could talk about those things. I could bring it to a personal level. I could lead with my own story of struggle. I could do all of that and do it in a space full of people that otherwise I would assume don't want to hear it, because I'm constantly surprised at how receptive people are to difficult conversations and how they can personalize it. So that was kind of a real catalyst for me early on. What about you?
For me, it's the parents. In my previous life, when I was working as a case manager for teen victims, and also my brief stint in education where I was working with a population of at-risk youth, I've talked to so many parents, and I've come across all sorts of different moms and dads out there, right? You got the ones that unfortunately couldn't care less about what's going on with their kid. And then you've got those that are very concerned. You've got those that are just at their rope's end and they just don't know what to do anymore.
Those are the ones we meet in the workshops.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's just like this aspect of being on the reactive side of things where you're kind of like that surgeon or like that doctor patching up the holes and patching up the Band-Aids. Yeah. And you're trying to mend relationships. You're talking to their kid and trying to help their kid understand, where their parents are coming from. Or sometimes it's even like the parents aren't even in the picture. There's like a grandma or an aunt that's in the picture that is also trying their best. But because of just the circumstances of each child in each case, it's difficult for them to be able to overcome some of the traumas that the youth has gone through and some of like the nuances of taking care of a child that's not yours. Yeah. That is just heartbreaking to me. And I think for me, when I was making that switch over to demand disruption, where we were talking more to communities and to churches and to schools, like one of the very first presentations I did, there was that parent that shared that she did not know what to do. And she was telling us that basically every single kid that she knew, I mean, you know, she was emotional, but she was basically saying that there's a lot of kids in her daughter's school that was addicted, and that her own daughter was addicted to animation pornography. And it just breaks my heart that even on this proactive side, right, where, you know, they still have their child in their home, where there's a mom and dad in a house, in a school in the suburbs, where this mom was going through all of this by herself and not knowing where to go, not knowing, you know, where to get resources. Hear about our program, hear about our workshop, come to it, and be able to get to a point of vulnerability where she could share with us that this is something that she was going through. Yeah, it makes almost like a different impact on me, because it felt like to empower these parents on this side, you know, it can help to prevent some of the things I've seen on the other side reactively, where something bad has already happened. I mean, of course, an exposure and addiction to pornography for a child is not great, not ideal, of course, but like the things I've seen, you know, working with teen victims and working with at-risk youth, you know, some of the things that those kids have gone through, you know, I'm grateful to be in a position to help empower parents to prevent their child from getting to that point. And I hear that a lot from like our followers and the people that support us, that they don't have a space where they can feel they can talk about this and talk about it in a way that, you know, is uplifting. There's so much shame, I feel like. Like even when I was talking to them, you know, before I got pregnant, I was like thinking to myself, you know, I'm not a parent. And so how valid would I be as a person to be able to speak to other parents? But then now, you know, anticipating the birth of, you know, my own child, you know, it kind of just puts into this perspective of like, you know, there's so much shame already in how culture and how, like, you know, all this pressure into being a parent, that I can totally just understand, you know, how a mom gets to that point and how a mom gets to that point where she just doesn't feel like she can reach out to others. And I think that's what motivates me to continue, you know, our work currently, to be able to make more spaces for moms and dads out there to not feel shame in parenting, because as we'll talk about in this first season, this porn prevalent culture is a very scary place to parent in.
Oh, no question about it. I remember that day, we had about maybe 30 parents there, and I remember the school it was at. But what I remember most is the conversation afterwards. She was asking us questions in class, and then in class, another parent asked a question off of her question, and we saw this crosstalk.
Yeah.
And what I saw was a couple people who were desperate for, give me something that I can say that will at least let me show that I care and that we're in this together, because that's the part that's missing, right? That's the link. And then afterwards, when you were talking to that parent, just her body language, I mean, she was still freaked out a little bit.
Yes.
Who wouldn't be? But even at one point in her, I think when she was talking, she was questioning, well, but it's anime. Should I be super mad? It sounds terrible. Like there was all of this searching and uncertainty.
Yeah.
And you were able to really bring to her not only an understanding, but a practical application. In fact, when you talk to your daughter, it's not going to be easy, but acknowledge that. And then taking her through some steps. Yeah, I remember that. And that is powerful, because that then becomes the ripple effect. And so that kid values themselves more. Because when they get in a relationship, right now it's an online thing, but when they're in a relationship, and they're in a relationship with somebody who's seen that and thinks that's what it is to be a man in a relationship, and then there's an abusive, we've seen skyrocketing teen dating violence. And a lot of that comes from research that's proving that it's because of graphic and aggressive exposure to pornography. So just some of the things that we deal with on a regular basis. I think the podcast, just getting this first episode off the ground, I think the best way to summarize it is one of the things that we say is fighting demand is the most direct way to fight human trafficking. That sounds like a pretty bold statement, because it is. But we didn't say it. That's not where the power lies in that statement. The power is, that was said by a survivor friend of ours, Rachel, who has been an expert witness, who is a sexual assault nurse examiner, and an overcomer of human trafficking. And she said that to our audience in our first fundraiser. And I've never forgotten that. That resonated with me. And I was supposed to talk next. And I remember it hit me right here. And I couldn't even speak. I was back there trying to guzzle water so I could get some words out. But if we can proactively and reactively intercede and help people really deconstruct what culture has told them to this point, because it is confusing. Well, what's bad? What's not bad? What's kind of normal exposure? And what is porn prevalence and hyper exposure? Getting some footing there can give parents a step forward, but beyond parents, individuals.
Yeah.
And that way you're meeting them at 19 years old at a training or 25 years old at a training, and I'm not meeting them at 32 years old in handcuffs, because that's the other part of what we do.
Exactly.
We're going to talk about that in this podcast. Yeah, we'll talk about our programs. We can touch on them here in a second, but the range, it can't just be talk to the guys who are buying sex and fueling trafficking, because that guy is not a today problem. That guy was a 3-year ago problem, 5-year ago, 8-year ago. Where was a man in his life that said, no, that's not what it is to be a man? Where is a person in that guy's life that said, I know the culture tells you that you can have it all. It's all right there. It's a few clicks away. What's the big deal? But you're trading something and you're getting pennies on the dollar.
Yeah.
Like, being able to have that conversation is also an empowering way to bring this to a proactive standpoint that prevents us from having to be reactive.
Yeah. And I think too, like, having the problem addressed from both sides is so important, because I think, thinking about the guy that ended up at the point of arrest and thinking all the way back to, where did, someone fail to reach out to him, and then think too about, where in our communities are there already spaces that are doing that, and going in and being able to educate them on what does it look like to fight human trafficking. Because, so often when you talk about fighting human trafficking, or you're talking about fighting the demand for human trafficking, it feels intimidating. Like, for me, when I first heard about all this, years ago, it sounded very intense, and even learning about the intervention and the reactive parts that you do, it sounds intense. But I think what people don't realize is that mentoring is fighting human trafficking.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. And being able to take time out of your week and meet up with, the son of a young single mom that's in your neighborhood, and taking him out for a coffee or a meal, and just building relationships. That's fighting human trafficking. And so, how can we get into these spaces and come alongside programs that are already doing some of this proactive work, and, just kind of contribute to the conversations that need to be had? Because it's all a part of it. How can we have more conversations between father figures in a neighborhood to young boys out there? How can we have, very similarly, mother figures and young daughters out there? How can we continue to facilitate that?
Yeah. You're making me think of, without getting super deep into programs, one of the things we do with men who are arrested in our post-arrest and post-conviction program is called the Bridge Method. And the point is to install failovers. What are the resources in that person's life so they never buy again? Because stopping one buyer isn't stopping one transaction. The average buyer is buying between 7 and 10 times in their life. Yeah. Some as many as 200. We've met guys that have met well over 200 times they've purchased sex. So what I'm bringing that up for is because one of the key revelatory moments in that training is so simple. We just draw a T-graph. And on one side, we talk about what does culture say it is to be a man? And then on the other side, I'll hold on to that one for a second, but very briefly, the first one, we hear all the answers because they're not in this class by themselves. They've got to bring a partner. And that partner is somebody who is sometimes a spouse, sometimes a coworker, sometimes a brother. I've had a man bring his adult son. And that touched my heart, man, because there are just so many layers of that. What it took, the courage it took for him to bring that guy. And when I asked him, that kid looks a little bit like you. When we separated the rooms, that young man looks a little bit like you. He said, yeah, that's my son. And I said, I just must know why you would ask your son to come today. Because I was hoping for the answer he gave. And he said, I didn't know I was going to be here doing this. And I don't want that for him. He had clarity after. And part of that came from experience. And so he wanted to pay that forward to the next generation. And that's a microcosm of what we can do when we understand things. And then the other reason I brought this up is that T-graph on one side, what does culture say it is to be a man? I mean, just watch anything. There's alpha male, never wrong, right? Can't be emotional. You got the sexually prolific, everything about that are the answers we get in that class from the partners and from the men who are arrested. But then we ask them, okay, imagine that the doorbell rings and that's your daughter's date. Who do you want on the other side of that door? And they usually say nobody, and that's not an option. So we can't, No, there's a man standing there. There's a guy standing there. What do you want? And they describe the polar opposite. I want him to be honorable. I want him to be respectful. I want him to be true to his word. I want him to take care of her, protect her, provider. And for there to be such a stark difference on the same page with generally the same question, it makes them stop and say, why am I settling for the left side? And we've gotten to a point, and this is not just about men, this is in our culture. What are the things that are creeping in? And that's what this podcast is going to talk about.
Yeah.
What are the little things that you don't really know are these little surrenders that you've given in your life or accepted as acceptable or fine because it's been normalized? And then what effect is that happening? And I can't wait to get into that with some of our guests that we've got lined up. That's going to be exciting.
I love that you share that he had brought his adult son, because I love doing that exercise too. My favorite place to do the exercise is actually with like college students.
Yeah.
Especially, I got this awesome opportunity to guest lecture a class that was only female students. So a bunch of 20-something-year-old girls and me in this class, and we went through that. Of course, I had to reframe it a little bit,
Sure.
right? So it's like, hey, like think about like someone that you really care about in your life, your girlfriend or your little sister, and think about, like she's telling you that, she found this new boo thing. What's culture telling you would be like, a boyfriend that she should go for. And they go off, oh, player, has lots of money, all the things.
A room full of college age, dating,
Yep.
probably years from getting married girls
Yep.
are saying the very same thing.
Things.
A room full of convicted sex pirates.
Exactly. And then when I do the other side where, I ask them, what do you want, for your little sister's boyfriend to be? And they say respectful, treats her really well, is a gentleman towards her, and we go into this conversation usually of like, why are we settling? And we shouldn't settle. Like the expectations, that we have, for our young women and your young men out there, just because culture is telling them that they should be a certain way, act a certain way, they have it already within them. We've seen this,
right.
Time and time again when we go to workshops and we talk to them, they already have an awareness of what culture is telling them. And they also already have it within themselves to want better than what culture is telling them. And so I think about like that kind of flip side still again, that like reactive side and the proactive side where, there's so much power in being able to come alongside a man, a father and a son after he's been arrested for something like this. But there's also so much power too in being able to talk to 20-something-year-old college students and being able to kind of empower them in what they already believe. And I think if anyone's listening to our work, I think those two groups would be the people that they would think would be like the least perfect, least ideal to be able to carry on that message. But I say no. I say those are the very groups that have the most power, most influence to really change the landscape of what culture is telling us when it comes to these kinds of things. And so
that's awesome. That fires me up. I love, of course, anecdotal stories, but that's so much more than that. It is a cross-section of what our culture, two very specific, but also very human and more prevalent cross-sections of our culture and that type of agreement. And I think about that in sort of the bigger societal picture. Mm-hmm. Society has found, and society, culture, read capitalist culture, sales where, I got something to sell you, has found that making people an individual is a very profitable way to do things. Mm-hmm. You are your own boss. Nobody tells you anything. In some cases, maybe you're even your own God. I don't know. But you got your own social media page, and you've got this, you've got that, you've got that. And it creates this powerful persona of the individual so that it can customize something to sell you. But then that individual is very much so an individual, and they are very isolated. We're so connected, we're not supposed to be this isolated.
Yeah.
I said I had a 25-year career in strategic sales, but I kind of covered up my culpability in all this. No exaggeration, I held the first iPhone in Houston in my hand because I worked for Verizon Wireless at the time.
Funny, because you hate Apple products.
I do. It's probably the last one I held in my hand that I worked forced to do. Apple, if you'd like to sponsor us, I'm listening.
I love Apple products.
Yeah,
we are an Apple household.
I'll switch for the right sponsorship. All right, so back to something that had some integrity tied to it. It didn't click then, but when I saw everybody else coming out with them, these crappier versions, how Microsoft still never figured it out, I have no idea. But I'm looking at it going, oh, this is a wonderful, terrible thing. Mm. And I kept hearing how your whole life's going to be on that thing. Your whole life's going to be on that thing. And I couldn't completely imagine it, but I'm in the industry and I'm realizing, no, they're not kidding. Your whole life is going to be on that thing. But it's not. It's a facsimile. It's a representation. It's an extension of a life that you should feel worthy enough to enrich. And coming all the way back to what we just talked about, I think one of the challenges working with men who are arrested is it's not about teaching them, here's the things that you need to do to be worthy of redemption, restoration. It's, you're already worthy, and here are the things you're going to see when you begin to do the work.
Yeah.
We just have to flip that. And the same is true for a room full of teenage girls, young adults. We've been exalted as the individual. We are the king of our world, but our worthiness seems to be at an all-time low in culture. And it doesn't have to be that way. And some of the things we talk about, if we take it away from the extremism of trafficking and we take it back to humanity, that's a common thread.
Yeah. I agree. It's that part that we talk about a lot of, are you being consumed? Or, like that part about are you being consumed or are you just a consumer? Like, what are the differences when we ask those two different questions? I guess when we kind of think about how inundated we are in technology and, when you're talking about your whole life being on a phone, how do you think that's connected to what we talk about? And as we go into our next episode and we talk a little bit more about pornography specifically, how does this all tie in your mind as someone who's held the first iPhone in Houston?
Wow, that's going to be, I've already dated myself, so I can pretty much say anything at this point. Because people right now, think about it, you're watching this on your phone. 15 years ago, if I told you were watching a video on your phone, you would have reacted because I saw people react. There's no way. That screen's too small. I'd never do that. How can it be that clear? I've got a big TV at home, and if you look at the cross-section of YouTube subscribership, age, and then what they watch that media on, predominantly devices.
Yeah.
And so everything has transitioned. We are in the greatest technology gap in the history of mankind. And I think every decade could say that because technology constantly grows. But it's this big of a gap. That was I think it's 2008, 2009. I have to go back and look. That smartphones were just entering the market.
Yeah.
And here we are in less than 20 years, 16 years, 17 years. It is everything, and it is completely ubiquitous in terms of what you're viewing, what you're seeing, what you're using it for, and it is your whole life. But that's this window of time. If you go back to 1886, they're still using Morse code. Okay?
Yes.
And then fast forward 100 years to 1986. So you went from Morse code, beep, 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 to a beeper. Literally, beep, beep, beep. That's how you got your messages. I know. I was there. I had one. And then I thought I was pretty serious stuff when I had an alphanumeric one. Watch out. I can read the whole message. I don't have to call you back. That was 100 years. And that was what we could really talk about as personalized communication when it came to individuals. And then from 86, we started seeing bag phones. And then we started seeing flip phones. And within a matter of less than 15, 20 years, we had a smartphone. Most of our society, a lot of our society grew up in that time that are parenting. And then they themselves had access to things they never did before.
Yeah.
And how did they handle that? I know I didn't handle it well. That's for sure. And then how do you parent knowing that you're struggling with that as well? It was so complicated. And we've never stopped giving ourselves enough grace for that as a culture. Well, we need to realize what it is, kind of forgive ourselves, backtrack and say, man, I did that wrong. Son, I want to talk to you because I'm worried about some things in life that I'm coming across and I know you must be. How do we break through that, take some culpability and not being prepared for something that was unpreparable, and then go from there? That's one of the ways that I would talk about pornography. Nothing I just said had anything to do with the graphic content. So we have stats. We've got everything. I created a model. There was a doctorate written based on it. We've seen it applied in academia and in the world. But the one-on-one human being, like just as a dad, looking back on things I should have done better, those are things that I can wallow in and feel like I'm ashamed of, or I can say, but I can tell this guy my story and say, you can do better, and you have that capability. So as we talk about it going forward, we will get into some things that are uncomfortable. I mean, that's just what we do. It's like we stand in churches and say porn, and we say masturbation, and we say all these words in a church. If I can say it there, I can certainly say it here. But those are just descriptions of the whole point of the journey that we're talking about. And as we go on that journey and talk with people about that and bring it up, we will apply that context to, yes, human trafficking, but more than that, something that is present in all of our lives, or somebody in the lives that we love. And that's really where I hope the most contribution that this little project has for the people who are tuning in.
Yeah. I loved hearing your perspective in that as a dad, because I think for me, actually, when you were talking about that perspective, I was kind of reflecting on my own perspective as like a young teen kind of growing up in this like very progressive revolution of technology. Because I remember having like my first iPod Nano. I had a blue one, and I downloaded like all of these songs on there. It was literally like my life.
Yeah.
And I remember a lot of my peers during that time too, like this was literally our life. And it was such like an incredible piece of technology that we had, that we were able to like carry our music with us. And then, of course, everything fast-tracked after that, because we all started having, the thin razor phones, and then eventually, the first iPhone. And we grew up in adolescence with this technology. And, there wasn't any, there wasn't anybody really to guide us. We were seeing that, this technology was available for the first time, and we were learning with our parents. Some of us were even educating our parents on like what this is. And it just seems so, crazy to look back at that now. And with all the things I know currently, what was missing from, our generation being able to experience this technology. It's like, of course things were going to get worse. Like, of course there'll be more points of vulnerability and exposure. It's not a surprise to me when there's like that statistic that, this company that produces, pornography came out where they're saying like the average age of their consumers 37 years old, like my generation.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's because of that. But also, it's just thinking too about what was missing. Like at the end of the day, it was still just a group of, young teens, 13 to 14 years old, that was experiencing, this new technology for the first time. And they're learning and growing and experiencing the world for themselves and not realizing what the world was going to become. And I think that's something that is core to us being able to make a difference in the work that we're doing, because I feel like similarly, even currently right now, it's hard to be able to convey that this is the world that has become from that time period.
Yeah.
And, and that they don't even realize like this is the accelerator of what that was at the very beginning, the start of an iPod Nano to the iPhone 16, And so it's like, how can we continue to not only raise awareness, be on the front lines reactively, be on the front lines proactively, but also to bring awareness to this world that we're currently living in now. Like, my baby is born Generation Beta.
Yeah.
And they're growing up.
It has a name already? Beta?
Yes.
Is that the generation?
Yes. Where
I'll write it down. I'm about 3 generations behind.
There you go.
I don't know which is which.
But they will be the generation that experiences like AI in their adolescence. And so, we have to catch up. We have to continue to catch up, and we continue to have to learn. And I think it's up to us, those of us that are aware, and those of us that are in the generations that are parenting young children right now, to really look out for what the world continues to be, so that they can be prepared when things happen.
Man. I shouldn't say anything because it's so good, but I am going to say something. Because the former Capital Project manager in me is listening to what your story is. And I heard iPod Nano. That's the what? That's the device, right? What did it do? It gave you individuality. See, going before that, you would have had to wait till every third, fifth song on the radio was one you liked.
Yes.
Get out your tape, record. Yes. Yeah, we'll explain that. If you don't know what a tape is, look it up. You'd have to make your own mixtape, whatever. Like, okay. It gave you power to control everything. Individuality. So what it was, what it gave you, and how it made you feel was not unhealthy. That was cool. That's what technology can do. Take that same template, that same, what is it? What did it do for you? And how did it make you feel? And apply that to today. It's not any different. It is the same formula that is extremely popular. It's just a different medium. And it's doing something different and delivering something different. And it's doing it in a way where there really isn't any responsibility to what it gives you, because you looked it up. We just gave you the medium.
Yeah.
That in and of itself is, I think, an example of some of the things we're going to unveil in this podcast.
Yes.
We're gonna strip things back that you just kind of take for granted. And whether it's because you've never really thought of it, or whether it's because you're in a part in your life that it is not new to you. You grew up with whatever that thing is, knowing what came before. helps you kind of forecast what's coming next. And we're talking about AI a lot now, but just even smartphones, which we talked about in this conversation.
Yeah.
We have youth that grew up with it and expect it by the time they're 9 or 10. So when we equip somebody with something, a device, a car, we make sure they understand what it can do for them and then the dangers of that and then how to use that, and then we test them on it. I would wager that people are getting in much more trouble, much more danger on a phone than they are in a car when they first start driving. But are we doing all those things? So I cannot wait to dig in. I know that is going to be just a fraction of the things that we get to discover and bring in insightful and talented people that are doing great work, but then also challenge a lot of these norms that we deconstruct those, we start to see the points where we can make it a turning point. All right, well, I think that officially means that we have finished our first episode.
Yes.
And if we had a studio audience here, I know that they would agree, but we don't, so we'll take a poll. Raise your hand if we crushed it. Yeah, I agree.
We totally did.
All right. Our own cameraman didn't raise his hand, but that's okay. You didn't see that. We'll edit that out. So all that's left now is to tell them what's next.
Yes. So we're super excited to be able just to have this space where we talk about things related to fighting human trafficking, but also like what does it mean to exist in this porn prevalent culture? You know, things that you might not be aware about, going deeper with specialists and experts in our field of work, getting their insight and perspective. And so, we're just so excited to be able to bring this conversation to you guys. We've heard from so many of our friends that, if we were the ones that were doing a podcast, like they totally listen because we're always talking about the most insightful, but sometimes also the most like crazy out there stuff.
Yeah. Oh, we have stories.
Yes.
I will tell you some buyer stories that you'll.
Yeah. And also too, like you've been on a lot of other podcasts as guests. So it's like, it's about time we have, us hosting our own podcast. And so just want to thank everyone for joining us. Wherever you're seeing this, please like, follow, subscribe, all of that good stuff. It's just been an incredible conversation, and we can't wait to see you again in the next episode.
Awesome. Thank y'all.